Good afternoon, YWCA viewers. I'm Lauren Trunco, Chief Development Officer here at YWCA, and this is Series 3, Episode 9 of The Butterfly Effect, our final episode. This is sponsored by KeyBank and Pursuit. KeyBank Foundation's mission is to support organizations and programs that prepare individuals for thriving futures. When people and organizations come together, great work gets done, and our entire region thrives. KeyBank thanks everyone at the YWCA Northeastern New York for making a difference. Pursuit provides businesses with affordable loans and resources so that they can transform and grow. They're an Albany-based community-focused lender, 100% invested in the success of their clients. If you're a small business owner looking for funds to start, grow, or recover, you can learn more at pursuitlending.com. We cannot thank these amazing sponsors enough for their support, not only this month, but year-round here at YWCA. This is an empowerment series where volunteer hosts, me today, interview inspiring women in our community. November is Homelessness Awareness Month, and we are choosing to focus our themes around housing and gratitude. We have certainly saved one of the Capital Region's best for this last episode. I'm very excited to have here with me today, Angelique Powell. Welcome, Angelique.
Hi.
Hi. Great. So are you ready to get right into it? This is like half hour, get to know Angelique. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's hear a little bit about you, kind of how you ended up where you are today. Just tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, cool. So I grew up locally. I went to Shaker. My family's from the city. I went to Ithaca College, and then I came back here. And then, as you do when you come back from school and you've experienced like other places, you want to go somewhere else. So I went and lived in Boston for 5 years, and then realized so I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and all of those kids are like adults now and like getting married and have families, and I was like missing everything. So I came back. And so my degree is in psychology with a minor in African diaspora and women's studies. So
Amazing.
But I graduated in 2009. And if anyone remembers, that was into a recession, and there were a lot of job opportunities available. So I ended up working a bunch of different jobs. I ended up landing, though, in retail management. And so I worked for Gap Inc. for a while, specifically Old Navy, mostly because like I kind of fell into it. It was like a part-time job that I was working because Boston is really expensive to live in. And so I had to take on another job. And by day I was doing early childhood education. And so that wasn't paying enough to like really survive out there. So like I was working at Old Navy in the evenings and weekends, and a big part of like their sales and hospitality motto and model was just like being the person that I naturally am. And like I was enjoying coming there and like talking to women, talking to women about their clothes, and they would ask me questions and like, does this work? And I would get questions, and I was just having fun. But that was like literally what they wanted you to do. So then I got promoted through the ranks. Unfortunately, because it is like such a large corporation, I was able to transfer when I came back. But when I got back here, I ran into like my very best friend from high school. And high school was hard for the both of us. And so like had trauma bonded then. And when we both got back, it was still a tough time for the both of us in a different way. And so we reached back out and like kind of trauma bonded again through this experience. And he had picked up this play and was like, hey, Schenectady Civic Playhouse is like doing this play. I think we should go audition for it. There's roles for both of us. Now, mind you, I performed all through high school, middle school. I did a little bit during college. That's actually the first time I did the vagina monologues. And I had decided that my friends are super talented. They are all going to school for theater. That's them, not me. I just did this for fun, and now that's done. Mind you, my best friend, he had just come back from the city trying to make a go of it at being an actor, got really discouraged. He had his master's. He had traveled to England to he has a master's in musical theater. So for me, he's really, really professional. And I did this for fun as a kid. So he convinced me, like, he's like, will you just read the play? Just read the play. And so I read it. And then after I read it, I was like, God, I can't not play this character. Like, I really want to do it. The play was called Clybourne Park, if anyone is wondering. And I haven't stopped performing in the Capital Region since that play.
Thank goodness. You're so good. If you didn't catch us, our Vagina Monologues, in the end of September, Angelique was part of that cast. And I had no idea your theater background when I asked you. I just knew that from your current role at the Blake Annex. And when you showed up and read, I was like, oh my God, we have like a star in our cast. I was so unprepared. You're amazing on stage. Absolutely amazing. I can't wait to see you in something else soon. What do you have coming up, by the way? Are you doing it?
Yeah, so I'm like taking like a little bit of a break. I just finished a play with Black Theater Troupe of upstate New York. It was called Knock Me a Kiss. And it was a really, really fun play about W.E.B. Du Bois's daughter. And so that just wrapped up at the mid-November. And the next thing I have coming up is actually, I don't even know if it's announced yet, but I can like kind of announce it right now. I'm working with Creative License, who has residency over at Cohoes Music Hall with Playhouse Stage Company. And it'll be in May. It's a play called Afterlife.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's awesome.
I feel like a ghost story, so I'm excited to be scared.
I love it. And so the Blake Annex, tell folks about what you do there right now.
Yeah. So I am the director of community animation, which is like every time it's always a conversation when we talk about my title, right? So I started out here as a community manager of the space. The Blake Annex is a co-working community. If you want to get like very basic of what exactly specifically the space is. But it is a mission-driven co-working community. So what does that mean? That means that people who are invested in having a more equitable, more diverse, and more inclusive Capital Region community will find like-minded individuals who are working underneath this roof here. And the concept of the Blake Annex, which was the idea of Peter Gannon, the CEO and president of both the Blake Annex and the United Way of the Greater Capital Region, is that this space would allow for people to organically collide and collaborate to better serve our community, right? And also will eliminate a lot of the barriers to access that different organization space. So we have organizations that are in their infancy working alongside institutions like the United Way of the Greater Capital Region or the Capital District YMCA. And so there's a lot of institutional knowledge that you gain just by being able to organically collaborate with one another. But then also, we're kind of in, so this space soft opened last summer, but we're like in this phase 1B now where we can start elevating things because we're not just focused on like the physical plant anymore. And while there are some capital improvements that will be done to the physical plant thanks to a grant that we were awarded by Senator Schumer's office through a congressional earmark, we're focused now programmatically. And so programmatically, we plan to be able to infuse the space with the things that will help elevate nonprofit organizations. We're talking about trainings around HR and grant writing and funding and all of those things that will help each of us reach our goals just a little bit faster.
Yeah, it's an amazing space. I was shocked the first time, you see the pictures online and people posting stuff about it. But to actually like walk in the doors there, and obviously you're one of the first spaces that I saw when I came. But it's just so welcoming, and it's such a creative space to meet with like-minded people that are trying to make the world a better place. And as like cliche as that sounds, that really is, it's just so nice to be in such a big space full of people that are looking to do that. So you guys are doing awesome stuff there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like this work that we all do, we all love it, right? But it doesn't make it any easier. and like as far as like, the nonprofit sector goes, Now, I say this in saying that this space is open to anybody who would like to participate in the community here, whether you work in the nonprofit sector or the for-profit sector. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the folks that we attract tend to be from nonprofit agencies. And that the reason being is that, nonprofits, especially here, serve to fill that gap between private funding and government funding. And there's such a significant gap of need there. And it's hard. It's hard, like what we're up against, like all the time. And all of the things that we see in terms of what the community needs. I mean, better than anyone, working for one of my literal favorite nonprofit organizations.
It's so nice because there's so many services in our capital region. We certainly feel really lucky to be a part of Schenectady because it's so small. Our city is pretty small and we're all so close together. We're like always a phone call or a block away. But even, venturing and dipping my toe out into the Albany region, everyone's found their own little crack to fill, right? The gaps that you were talking about, and there's more. Trust me, like there's more that we can always do, but people have a really collaborative way of finding what's missing and working together to address it here. And I love that about this area.
And it's what's fun about working here at the Blake is that we assume, right, that certain partners know each other because they're like working on filling like the same gap, right? Or somewhere around in the same sphere. And there's just so many of us doing the work in different ways. And exactly what you said, everyone's finding like their own niche on how they're going to make an impact on the community. So two of my favorite things about working here is getting to know each organization's story, right? And like exactly how, like what is the niche that they're filling. So that's really cool. Everyone takes a different approach to it, but like really when you boil it down, we're all working towards like that one common thread, right? Of a more equitable, more diverse, more inclusive capital region community. And then my other favorite thing about working here is that, I think I lost it.
Don't you hate that? I can see it in your face too. As soon as you started, you were like, "Oh God." You know what? I've got a question. I mean, I bet it'll jog your memory. Tell me about somebody that inspired you when you were younger.
My dad really inspired me and still does. Both of my parents really have like a relentless pursuit for excellence, right? But my dad was always this like extraordinary figure in my life. And every time I talk about him, people assume, and because people know me, they assume that I have like this like really gentle like Santa Claus father, and that's so could not be further from the truth. I'm, for reference, I'm West Indian. I'm Jamaican and Puerto Rican. My father is extremely Jamaican. So I would not call my father warm, but there's so much love there. And he, some things certainly now that we know better, I want to do better. But he definitely instilled in me like, this dedication, hard work. He came from immigrants. His family all came, like he was the first who was American born. Everyone else was born in Jamaica. And so this idea of like, you need to work twice as hard in order to be considered equal is something that he instilled in me when I was younger. And I appreciate now that like, I'm in a place where I can see my dad kind of looking up to me now because I want to break all of that, right? Like I want to smash all of that. I think it's like, I'm not going to teach my kids that at all.
Right.
Like, you are good enough exactly the way you are. And the world needs to respond accordingly. You don't need to change yourself so that other people respect you.
I love that. And I can totally understand like the generational switch, right? Because the older generation, they've got to fit into the world, right? It's their job to figure out how to be in spaces and how to navigate spaces, especially, professionally in that environment. But I love that. And I think that's very across the board with our generation is like, no, we're gonna make the spaces. We're gonna create the spaces that we really needed, back then.
It's interesting because I feel like our generation specifically, did a little bit of both, right? Like, I feel like the younger generation is now fully invested in, like, you can't tell me anything, and I'm so proud of them.
I know. I'm very envious. You're right. You're right. I should have noted the younger generation. Now that, when I started at the Y, I was like one of the youngest people here at 30 years old, and now, knocking on 40. And supervising the younger generation, it is. I get such a kick out of it, and I love it's just so brave to me to walk into a space. Like for me, I remember being in professional environments being, my paycheck depends on this. I have to, A, B, and C, but maybe it's the job market switch too, but they come in, they're like, this is what I need. This is what you're going to do.
Oh my gosh, they're so radical. And it just in ways that I always have felt, but like, I had that old mentality inside of me of like, you have to make yourself fit into this space, as opposed to them. They're like, no. Everybody fits. Let's figure it out.
Tell me, is anybody else in your family a performer? Anybody else do performing? No? Oh my gosh, that's surprising.
I know. In fact,
I assumed it wasn't going to be your dad when you described him. I couldn't imagine.
No, not a single person in my family. My dad really enjoys, he's a great storyteller.
Yeah.
And I say that because every story he's ever told, I can picture it, right? And in that way, it's really, he's a wonderful orator for sure. He's really invested in like movies and things like that. And like my dad was law enforcement. My brother followed in my father's footsteps in law enforcement. And I've always been the black sheep of the family, right? So I have always like, I remember my earliest like words at like 4 years old being like political arguments with my father. I have always been far too liberal. My parents and my entire family really tends to not want to, make any waves, and they tend to lean more towards a moderate, democratic politics. And I tend to be like really in your face liberal. And so we've been arguing since I was 4 years old. And I remember coming home from college one year and getting into an argument with him. And I was really riled up about it. And my dad was like, oh, I miss this. No one else argues.
I love that. It's so important for families to be able to, to appreciate that about each other. You hear about kind of relationships being damaged because of different views and things like that. But I love that. That's such a good spirit to have, the people that you love, you're not out to hurt each other. You just have different opinions,
Yeah, 100%. My dad, he's so precious. Like, so he like really is invested in like TV shows and things like that. And a lot of the memories I have are us sharing. Like, I was going away to college when Scandal came out, and I remember starting it with like my dad. And like, I genuinely thought, because like I was in this house of law enforcement, that I'll work in the law, but I'm going to be defense attorney because I think this is stupid and I'm going to defend the people that you're talking about. And then I went to Ithaca College, and if anybody knows anything about Ithaca College, I completely changed my thinkings, and I fully
love Ithaca. It's beautiful out there. Beautiful.
It's amazing. And like, I just fully embraced Audre Lorde and was like, you can't dismantle the house with the master's tools, and decided that's like not the route for me at all. And I realized one day, like while performing, like, oh, you didn't want to be a lawyer. You wanted to play a lawyer.
Oh, that's hysterical. And you can do both, right? I mean, you get the best of both worlds. You can do what you're passionate about and still play these fun characters. That's awesome. That's great. Do you have, you mentioned your dad inspiring you. Did you have like a mentor professionally, or when you hear the word mentor, who comes to mind?
Yeah, so two things come to mind. So when I was a kid, I was a part of Sponsor Scholar. Which is a nonprofit organization locally, Capital Region Sponsor Scholar. They're actually, they operate outside of United Way's old office spaces. And the program was interesting to me. I often talk about it when I talk about this particular space, because this space to me is just so inviting. And as like a kid, having to do check-ins like that, I probably would have felt more comfortable coming to like a space like here. So it's like part of the reason why I'm really proud that our CEO made such an investment in bringing our entire team to come work out of this downtown Albany space. Because I remember driving up to like that space up in the Pine Bush as a kid, like having to do the check-ins for Sponsor Scholar and thinking like, wow, what did I do wrong to like have to do this? And I was so scared every single time. I just felt othered, right? And like that's literally the opposite of like what we want the people we serve to feel. But the best part of Sponsor Scholar is there was a woman who was my mentor. They have a mentor program and it's really awesome. And this woman who was my mentor, like mind you, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. So like my parents had decent jobs, but certainly like, they couldn't spend a lot of money on things that they find like absolutely necessary. And the arts, believe it or not, was not considered necessary.
That wasn't high on the list of priorities.
So I met this woman who was my mentor, and she took me to see her friends perform spoken word at Cafe Lena in Saratoga. She took me to SPAC to see the ballet, and I remember watching the ballet, and I remember thinking, it was Midsummer Night's Dream, and I remember thinking, how do I understand what's happening when there are no words? And I remember thinking like, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to make people feel like this every day.
It's beautiful.
And so that was the first person that I've ever had that like really impacted my life, because even though I steered away from theater for a while, it stuck with me that like that I wanted people to feel this way because I was able to make them allow them to feel this way, right? And that too, I wouldn't have had access to this if it wasn't for this woman who had far more means than I did, and people who look like me weren't on that stage. And how do I change that? And so she really like, I wish I could. I have to go back to Troy High and like ask if there are records, because like I want to thank her so much because she completely impacted the trajectory of my life. I am now completely focused on being a representation of like our entire lived experience and on stage, and also wanting people who look like me to have permission to feel the entire gamut of emotions, because there's so many, and we're often told like we're not allowed, you have to be strong, you're not allowed to feel that, and a variety of ways. If you're a man, you're not allowed to cry. If you're a Black woman, like you're not allowed to really be sensitive, right? But we are human beings just like everybody else, and like experience all of the same, we fall in love, our hearts broken, like our stories aren't limited to like how white supremacy has affected our lives, right? And I just want to be able to make people feel all of the things all of the time.
I love that. And like I said, I've only seen you in the vagina monologues, which I will change as soon as the opportunity presents itself. But I think you are 100% accomplishing that. And the fact that, you kind of lead with that in all the spaces that you're in is very apparent. And I think one of the reasons that I just love your energy so much is I can see that you lead with that in every space that you occupy. So kudos to you, my dear.
Thank you.
Do you want to say her name? Who was your mentor?
Gosh, I wish I could remember her name, but like I am 35, and this woman was in my life when I was 16, and I can't remember her name. I can see her face like vividly.
It's so amazing that she put an emphasis on the arts like that, because I think, like you said, for so many people that don't get exposure to that, you don't know that feeling. Like you don't, and like watching people express themselves through art, it really does draw you into this world that you didn't even know was possible until you're there. And even if you see things on TV, which you still get it, but to see like live theater or go to a museum and or an exhibit and meet the artist that's behind all of this stuff, it really is amazing what people can create, what humans can create.
And I remember like her friends to me were the coolest, because like adults do this, like this isn't just like this is like play pretend, like, but like these adults were like standing up there doing this thing, and I remember thinking, wow, I like want to have friends like that one day. And now I'm a Troy Foundry Theater Company member. We've been nominated for several Broadway World awards this past year, which is extremely exciting, both for our company and for several actors in our company. Me included, I was nominated for Best Performer for a performance I did at Curtain Call. Thank you. But like, all of my friends at Troy Foundry Theater remind me of those friends that it was like, I hope I have friends just like that when I get older, and that like this is my circle. But what's fun is that now my partner, he has 2 children, a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they are so a part of all of this from such a young age that, like, you know, all of this this magic, like, they get to participate in, and like they see us transform into it all the time. It's like really cool for them. And we've created a community where like the people we work with welcome our children. So like they're allowed to come to rehearsal, they're allowed to help with the lighting board. Like,
oh gosh, I hope that you pass whatever you've got going on to the next generation. Any chance for kids to see you in action? I just totally like splurged, blew the bank, and bought tickets pretty close to The Lion King coming to Proctor's for me and my son, who's 6. Because he loves that movie, and it's been on. I wanted to see that for so long, and I saw it on the sale. I was like, click, 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 done. I'm not even looking back. I can't.
I tell you, it's worth it. It's worth every dollar that you spend on it.
I know.
It's so good. I saw it at Proctor's like several years ago, and it's probably it's just one of those productions that sticks with me. Like, the costumes,
I feel like
the singing, the dancing. It's so you're gonna have such a great time, and he's gonna be.
I know. I can't wait for him to see it. I'm more excited to see it through his eyes, but I'm also really excited for myself. Just as much. We're like going on 26 minutes here. I've only gone through a couple questions.
Oh my gosh.
You touched on so many, so let me just go through. Okay, I'm curious to know, what advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Oh my gosh. I would tell my 21-year-old self to just like follow your gut. Like, you've got strong instincts, kid, and you're going to end up doing exactly what you want to do. You always do. So like, don't listen to anybody else. Don't, it's longer. It takes a much longer process to get to where you're going to end up being if you don't just follow your gut when you start with.
Yeah. So true. So true. How do you, there was one that I wanted to ask you about, how do your identities play a role in your industry? I mean, you've got a couple different things going on, and you touched a little bit on in the arts and kind of what that means, representation, in that vein. But tell me, when you hear that question, kind of how do your identities play a role in what you do?
Yeah, it's interesting because so I'm going to tell a story from when I was like a lot younger, when I was in high school. I've already articulated, my politics tend to be more liberal than like my family's politics. And I remember one day, my mom, and, I was in the theater. So like my mom, she like just was really trying to understand, right? This is an older generation. Certainly she doesn't believe this anymore. She's learned better, but like she really couldn't understand why I felt so strongly about gay rights, right? And so she asked me, "Are you a lesbian?" And I said back to her, "Well, I don't understand why I would have to identify as that specific identity for me to have empathy for someone who does."
Sure.
And I articulated like, we expect white people to treat us equally, Mom, right? But they're never going to be Black. Like, they're never going to be Hispanic, but they have to have empathy. And then that carried with me for a while. And I started to recognize that when certain like cataclysms were happening in our country, that Black women tend to be the ones who have this like well of empathy for anybody who's in any lived experience, right? We just have this ability to be like, well, I get what that might feel like, even though I don't live that experience, right? So my identity, I feel like it's complicated because I certainly also, on the flip side, see the disparities and inequities that exist in literally everything that I do. And it's hard because, macroaggressions are a lot easier to confront, but microaggressions, not so much. Yeah. Because microaggressions, like, you end up gaslighting yourself. Like, did I see that? Did that really happen? Even though you know exactly what it is, right?
Sure.
But I would also say that my identity has been really helpful in being able to navigate people and being able to be the person that I am. Bringing that back to the Blake Annex and my title, when I was promoted, Peter asked me what I wanted my title to be. And I had been studying like nonprofit centers, work centers, and they talk about this idea of community animation and community animators. And those are like the people who breathe life into a space, because a space can just be a space. It can be an office park and people can have desks and chairs, and that's all it is. But I said I wanted to be the director of community animation because I wanted to breathe life into the people who are here in this space. And in as far as my identity goes, in this role, I feel like it allows me to have just a bunch of grace for every single person. And then in turn, it allows people to walk into this space and feel like they have the ability to be their authentic selves here. And I've heard it, like, I've heard feedback from plenty of people who have come in and said, like, there's just something different about this space here that just allows, it just like lets me be me.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any higher compliment than creating an environment, whether it's you, a team of people, a physical environment where people can bring their authentic selves, is so special. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Is there an interview question that you've never been asked before, and what would your response be? I know this is a tough one. Some people get hemmed up on this one.
Yeah, I guess, this is something, I don't know if I specifically know what the interview question would be, but the topic that I would love to talk about that nobody ever talks about, right, is this like idea of like being a recognizable public figure and like being someone who just like has a talent in a specific realm that will put them in that public space, if that makes sense. Yeah. So for actors and things of that nature, but I'm like a pretty public figure, both at my day job and my night job. Yeah. So, and I think that we never talk about like how those people feel in terms of like needing like to retreat from like the public, right? I think once you are one of these public figures, it's an assumption that you 100% of the time are being consumed by the public. And so you have to show up that way 100% of the time. And I don't think there's a lot of grace given to those people. I think that people assume that those folks just like really enjoy being like in the public eye. And I don't necessarily know if that's true. Like, I certainly, like, if I were to ever, take off and like be famous, like I would be a recluse. I don't.
I can picture me like a writer in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with no internet service. I'll snail mail you my copy, right? Yeah, we were just talking about this before we went live, and that, and I totally agree. I think that would be a really interesting conversation. You almost need like a support group for those people to be their authentic selves, because we're all putting on a hat for the work that we do, right? But we've got to unplug. And when we're having a bad day, we don't get to say, I don't want to do that today. I can't go in front of the camera today, or I can't do this. You're still there as kind of hosting that personality that people are expecting. So, and then if you do retreat, it's like, oh God, keeping up with the Jones type of feeling, like, oh, I'm not there, I should be there. So that's really interesting that you bring that up, because that's something.
And I feel like it's like, so I'm going through. I just discovered at my big old age of 35 that I potentially have ADHD, and I've been going through, all the testing and things like that with my therapist. And probably so, which explains like everything. But, but I will say that like, that for me is like also like a mental health conversation because like, in the ADHD sphere and with autism, we talk about masking. And like, masking as if you are, neurotypical,
Right.
as if you're pretending, almost wearing this suit of like what other people, how they show up, because that's totally normal for them to show up in that way. And so that's been deemed the norm. And so it's like, it's such a large conversation about like, if you have to mask like your entire life, like who are you?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. That would be interesting to dive deeper into for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. What is we're going to end on this one, a good one. What is the best advice you've ever received?
What is the best advice I've ever received?
Sounds like you've been around a lot of amazing people.
I have, I get really great advice all the time. But I think the best advice that I have ever received has been, and this like shows up in all of the different ways that I show up professionally, whether it be on stage or off. You don't do this for anybody but you. So don't let anybody take the joy out of what you do away from you, because you do this for you. And by making other people feel that joy, like you're still doing it for you. So don't let anybody take it away.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice. As we get older, I love how that kind of really comes into focus. You know what I mean? All the noise starts to, that's what I'm most looking for. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to get older, but I just love that about every year that goes by in life. Just the noise kind of goes away. You really
starts to dissipate. I joke all the time. I say the same thing. I cannot wait to be like, just like an older woman who does not care.
Oh my God. Can you imagine being that? Yeah. I agree. Looking forward to it. It's a welcome gift, right? To get over gracefully. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on yet? You've touched on a lot. We normally go a half hour, and I just totally got lost in your conversation. But is there anything else that you didn't get a chance to share that you wanted to?
No, you know what? Honestly, all I can say right now is, do the right thing by saying, come down to the Blake Annex, stop down and see me, take a tour of the space. It's Giving Tuesday. Make sure that you are donating to one of your favorite nonprofit organizations. We live in the Capital Region community where there is a plethora of different organizations doing amazing work. So please consider when you are making your Giving Tuesday contributions, making a donation to the YWCA of Northeastern New York and also the United Way of the Greater Capital Region, so we can continue doing this type of work that we're doing.
Yeah, awesome. Angelique, it has been such a pleasure talking to you today. I thank you for your time and your wisdom, your infinite wisdom that you shared with me and the rest of those tuning in today. And yeah, thanks for being our last guest. As I mentioned, certainly not least, but I'm glad we rounded out the season, the November month with you. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.